What's going on, people? Today we're about to break down episode 27 of Attack on Titan Season 4, in which Falco's Jaw Titan finally made its first appearance. In this video I'll be explaining the interesting reason why his shifter looks like a giant bird, as well as the different ways that this has been foreshadowed from the first episode of the season. Along the way we'll also be breaking down Kiyomi's new plan to stop the rumbling, and why General Magath made the sacrifice that he did. Before we get into it though, this video is brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. In case you've been stuck in the past dimension and haven't heard about this game, Raid is a free-to-play RPG available on Android, iOS and PC. It has amazing boss battles, global player versus player modes, and over 600 champions to choose from. One of the great things about Raid is that the champions come in different shapes and sizes, with each of them belonging to a specific faction. My personal favourites right now are the Dark Elves, not just because of their epic designs, but also because of the story behind them. 700 years ago, they used to just be regular high elves like this, but they were tempted to the dark side for reasons that surprisingly had nothing to do with getting evil powers. Soon after that, war broke out between the two sides, and with champions like this, it's easy to see why peace hasn't really been an option. Anyway, there's never been a better time to get started with Raid, and if you use the link in my description or scan the QR code, new players will get a free starter pack worth almost $30. This includes a free champion called Reiner, who's a member of the Barbarian faction. Not to mention you get 200k silver and an ancient shard that will give you another champion as soon as you get in the game. You'll find these rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days only, so be sure to click the link in the description and I'll see you in the game. Okay, so in the last episode, the Alliance's main goal was to get control of this flying boat, and they tried to do that by taking a peaceful approach where they wouldn't have to kill any Yeagerists. Unfortunately, as things progressed, that plan fell apart completely, with Flock then ordering his men to get rid of Armin, Mikasa, and the rest of the Alliance. This put the Scouts in a position where they had to start killing their fellow islanders, which culminated in Daz and Samuel being murdered by Connie. Episode 27 begins with Daz's lifeless body descending deeper into the water, and the two Scouts take a second here to reflect on what they just had to do. Connie was one of the people who was most vocal about not wanting to resort to violence, so to end the lives of two friends is something that's likely going to haunt him regardless of how this ends. In the background we see Annie and Reiner smacking down some more Yeagerists, and this continues on for a while, and after that the anime moves down to the basement where the Alliance encounters their next big obstacle. As we already know, the Azumabito mechanics are the only ones who can prepare the flying boat for takeoff, and in this scene they reveal it would take them half a day to get it ready. By itself, this creates two major problems, with the first being that it's impossible to defend the flying boat for that long. Considering that the enemy can endlessly send wave after wave of reinforcements, there's no way for this small group of people to protect the plane and the mechanics for half a day. The second problem is that even if they somehow managed to do everything right, it would still be too late to save Liberio. In the last episode, Hange confirmed that the rumbling was already on the Marlyean continent, and in half a day the Titans would be able to keep marching for hundreds of miles. This means that no matter what happens, there's a 0% chance they'll be able to stop Liberio from getting trampled, and this causes John to flash back to one of the good times they had there. It's no secret that the Scouts spent months living in Marley during the time skip between seasons 3 and 4, and this memory is from a time when they got drunk with some refugees who were living on the continent. With Liberio being destroyed, he realizes that all the nice people he met are going to be trampled, which obviously isn't something he wanted to happen. That being said, Kiyomi comes up with a plan that would at least give them hope of saving innocent people in other cities, and this plan involves preparing the flying boat somewhere else. We've already established how the situation on Paradis is way too chaotic for them to do it here, but on the continent, the Azumabito have a hangar where the plane could be serviced. In the basement, she shows them a map of Marley, and based on the hangar's location, it should be possible for the Alliance to get there pretty quickly. Using this ship to get them there, the mechanics would then have time to get everything ready without waves of Yeagerists trying to kill them. However, Kiyomi's plan does also come with a massive risk, because the place they're going to is set to be trampled by the rumbling. Although they'll be able to reach the hangar before any Titans get there, there's no guarantee the mechanics will finish preparing the plane before the rumbling arrives to squash them. Either way, it's still the best choice they have right now, and so the Alliance sets the plan into motion by telling the others what's happening. In Annie's case, her main motivation for stopping the rumbling was to save her dad. At this stage, she has no idea that saving her hometown is impossible, and as a result she continues to help out by defending the Azumabito. In this scene, Kiyomi and the mechanics exit the basement so they can run towards the ship, while Hange, Mikasa and the warriors do everything they can to keep them alive. As the Yeagerists continue to fire, the armored titan reaches over to offer some protection, but in the process he exposes himself to direct attacks from thunder spears. Up until this point, he and Annie had actually done pretty well to avoid taking damage from these things, but in this current situation, they had no option but to put their bodies on the line and essentially become human shields. In particular, the female Titan gets her arm blown off trying to save them, and then Reiner swoops in to take even more damage, similar to how he saved Zeke back in the first episode. Now, with all of this going on, Floch realizes that the Alliance are planning to escape by ship, and he orders the Yeagerists to focus on destroying it. This was a great strategy since all it takes is for one single Thunder Spear to make contact, and after that there's no way this thing would be able to set sail. What this means is that Kiyomi's plan will fall apart if just one soldier is able to attack the ship, but the female and armored Titans stand strong and do their best to intercept the different rockets. Despite that, Peak makes the observation that they won't be able to hold out long enough for the ship to leave, as the mechanics need around 15 to 30 minutes to get everything in place. The way things are going, the warriors will be blown to pieces before that can happen, and this is when Falco decides to get involved. Although Peak warns him against it, Falco felt like he had to do this because in his mind, the only reason things are going badly is because he's the one here instead of Porco. If Galliard was alive, then he would have been helping Annie and Reiner rather than watching them from the sidelines, and this survivor's guilt is why Falco had the urge to intervene. Instead of immediately chasing after him, Peak uses her Cart Titan to bring the remaining members of the Alliance to the ship, while Connie prepares to get back into the fight. Having already killed Daz and Samuel, the only way their deaths are going to have any meaning is if the ship sets sail and they're able to stop the rumbling. If Floch and the other Yeagerists manage to prevent that, then it means that Connie would have killed his friends for no reason, and that's why he's so determined to make sure his actions weren't in vain. Meanwhile, up on the rooftops, Hange notices a train full of reinforcements heading towards the harbour. On this train are the additional waves of Yeagerists that we mentioned earlier, and with the Alliance barely holding on as it is, the commander knew they had to deal with this train as a priority. Luckily for them, it was blown up out of nowhere before they had to do anything, and the person responsible was Instructor Shardis. Later in the video, I'll explain exactly why he did this, but for now, all we need to know is that he was inspired to take action after seeing the scouts working together with Annie. Speaking of the female Titan, after taking one too many Thunder Spears, her head had now been decapitated, not for the first time, while Reiner wasn't doing much better. In this state, the two warriors weren't able to move or see anything respectively, making them both sitting ducks as the Yeagerists made a move to kill them. However, at the last moment, Connie makes a heroic entrance as he slices down a whole group of enemy soldiers, while Mikasa supports him by taking out the ones who were shooting. At the same time, Jean chips in by shooting more Yeagerists with his rifle, and this moment was brutal because you could tell the girl he killed was absolutely terrified. Anyway, soon after this, the Cart Titan finally joins the battle by breaking through the rooftop, and we get this cool sequence of her evading about 50 Thunder Spear attacks. On the ground, Falco then runs towards the action, having already cut his hand, and this injury serves as the catalyst for his first ever transformation. I gotta say, this shot of his Titan emerging from the lightning was easily one of the best in the whole episode, and in terms of the design, it's unlike any Jaw Titan we've ever seen. To start things off, Falco's shifter has several bird-like features, including a beak made from Titan hardening, animalistic hair covering his whole body, feathers on his elbows, and hands that strongly resemble bird claws. In terms of other unique features, his jaw also has two sets of teeth, with his inner mouth being similar to that of a pure Titan, while his outer jaw is the one that deals the real damage. Now, if you've been wondering why exactly he looks like this, the answer is that it's a direct result of the Beast Titan's spinal fluid. In the past, we've seen how spinal fluid can allow one shifter to inherit the characteristics of another, with an example being how Eren ingesting armor fluid allowed him to gain armor of his own. When it comes to Falco, he drank the Beast Titan's tainted wine, which has now led his shifter to inherit these animal traits. Users of the Beast Titan are known to appear as an animal they have some kind of connection to, and in Falco's case, he's had a connection with birds ever since his introduction. The opening shot of the season was a bird circling above Falco as he told it to fly away, and later in the trenches, he mentions an interesting vision he was just having. In that vision, he was flying around with a sword while there were Titans around him, which could be foreshadowing to this current situation where you have people flying around with swords, and obviously the warriors and their Titans are in the battle as well. Other foreshadowing comes from the fact that his pure Titan arguably looked like a baby bird, and now his shifter is simply the evolved version of that. Anyhow, after seeing this development, Floch gets tired of playing games, and he makes a beeline straight for the ship. Like I said before, all it takes is one Thunder Spear to end this whole conflict, as the Alliance won't be able to stop the rumbling if the boat is destroyed. Along the way, he maneuvers past Falco, pushes back Hange, and uses one of his two Thunder Spears on Peak, meaning he had just one final shot to save Eldia. If he could accurately fire this Thunder Spear, then Paradis would have been saved while the rest of the world would be trampled, but as he went to fire, Gabby shot him in his other arm, which completely messed up the trajectory. The result was that both Flock and his Thunder Spear fell into the water, and the Yeagerists had lost the one person who was keeping them organized. From that point onwards, the battle then basically became a massacre, with Mikasa brutally murdering her fellow islanders in the most imaginative way she could find. While this was happening, Onyankopon and the mechanics had been loading the ship with coal the entire time, and with the Alliance now taking control of the port, the ship was finally ready to leave. There was of course a brief moment at the end where Falco began to lose control of his Titan, but generally speaking this wasn't that strange. We saw with Eren how certain people can go berserk when using their Titans for the first time, and Peak vaguely warned Falco that his first transformation wouldn't go well. Thankfully, before things could escalate, Magath showed up to slice him out of there, and with that the main part of the war was officially over. All that was left was to tie up some loose ends, and this is why the general stayed behind on the island while everyone else got on board the ship. Over the years, Paradis has captured various warships belonging to the Marlyean Navy, and Magath knew that this cruiser had the potential to catch up with the Alliance. This was a chance that Magath understandably wasn't willing to take, so much so that he was fully prepared to die so that the rest of the Alliance could maintain their pursuit of Eren. Now, regarding Instructor Shardis, he swoops in to kill a couple of Yeagerists that were pursuing Magath, and following that they each decide to work together. In the story so far, both of these men have played similar roles, as it was them who trained this current generation of Titan shifters, Ackermans, and royalty. It was because of their instruction that many of the main cast turned out the way they did, but in this scene Magath doesn't seem proud of that accomplishment. We've seen glimpses of this in the past 2 episodes, but the general feels guilty for ignoring his conscience, and for turning these innocent children into brainwashed warriors. In reality, he would have been a lot happier if they could have all lived normal lives, and in this memory of his students, you'll notice that half of them are dead, one of them betrayed Marley, and 3 others have time limits on how much longer they can live. Meanwhile, switching back to Shardis, we saw how a day earlier he didn't have the spirit to fight back against the Yeagerists, as it was his belief that they'd gain the support of people across the island. That said, while he was in the fort, he witnessed his former students heading south towards the harbour, and once he saw Annie was with them, he realised what they were planning. For them to be able to put aside their differences for the future of humanity, it just showed how much they'd grown, and it inspired Shardis so much that he chose to take action. What's sad about this though is that I'm not entirely sure anyone on the ship knew what Keith did for them, because he didn't really announce himself until way after they set sail. Regardless, it's obvious that he wasn't doing this for the recognition, and as Magath finishes laying out the gunpowder, the general then ignites it, blowing up the cruiser and everyone on board. This moment here was done really well, not just because of the music choice, but also because of Gabby's tearful reaction. From what we've seen, Magath displayed more empathy towards her than would ever be expected from a Marlyean, and I think she was grateful to him for this, similar to how she was grateful to that guard who was killed earlier in the season. Moving on to the post-credit scene, this moment happens hours later when Annie's healed from her injuries, and she's told by the commander that they won't be going to Liberio. As I mentioned earlier, the female Titan wasn't aware that saving Liberio wasn't possible, but after hearing the news she collapses to her knees as she's now lost her will to keep fighting. Her promise to her dad was the only thing giving her the motivation to keep moving on, but with that promise now dead, she barely has anything to live for. Hange goes on to explain, however, that Magath didn't sacrifice himself just for the sake of Marley or Liberio, but rather it was to save as many unknown innocent people as they could. In that way, the commander's trying to convince Annie that stopping the rumbling is a cause worth fighting for, even if her father can't be saved. In response, Annie returns to the original question she asked around the campfire, which is whether Mikasa or any of the scouts are prepared to kill Eren. If they're not prepared for Eren to die, then it will lead to a civil war between both sides of the alliance, and considering where Annie is mentally, right now she doesn't have the conviction to fight with them or even fight with Eren himself. The episode then ends with an aerial shot of the ship as it makes its way towards the hangar, and the question of whether the scouts are prepared to kill Eren still remains unanswered. Anyway people, that was my breakdown for episode 27 of Attack on Titan Season 4, and remember, the season finale won't be coming out until the 3rd of April. Be sure to sub so you don't miss my review of that final episode, and I'll also be doing an update video if they announce a part 3 for the final season. Until the next one, peace out.